Welcome to the Power Factor Show.
The bandwidth for this episode of the Power Factor Show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network. FirearmsRadio.tv.
Sponsored by Taylor Freelance, Rainier Ballistics, Hodgson Powders, and JPL Precision.
Hey everybody, this is Steve from Power Factor. This week's episode, we're going to take another chapter out of the book, Break 'em All, The Complete Guide to Fixing Clay Target Shooting Problems by B.J. McDaniel and Mark Taylor. Before we get started with that, I have a really important announcement to make. Mark Taylor has donated a couple copies of this book to the program as giveaways for like trivia questions. He also sent a copy of a book that he wrote called Clay Target Shooting, The Mental Guide. And as I've mentioned before, that I really believe the mental aspect of shooting is very important. So I'm going to take a look at that book and possibly review it on a future episode. If you don't feel that you're really that lucky at winning things, you can go ahead and order Break 'em All from Mark's website, deadtargetschool.com. Or you can go onto Amazon and buy it there for the hefty price of about $100. With respect to the Clay Target Shooting, the Mental Guide, you can go to Amazon and try to buy it there, and the used price is $335. The new price is $565. Or you can save a whole pile of money and go to Shotgun Sports Magazine. They have a shop there where they have different publications, books, DVDs, things of that nature, and you can get it there for about $20. I would recommend, however, that you go over to Amazon and take a look at the reviews for the book. Both books, actually. There's very, very favorable reviews on both of them. And I know that actually a lot of you have been going out and buying copies of this book. I talked to Mark about that, and he mentioned that their sales recently have increased dramatically, so that's a good thing. So thanks to all of you for going out and doing that. I really, there's a lot of books that I have that kind of like I go through, read them, and then pass them on to somebody else. But there are a few books that I have that I never release. This book is one of them. The two books by Gil Ash, If It Isn't Broke, or If It Isn't Broke, Fix It, or Don't, yeah. And The Mental Guide to Shooting is another one. The one You Gotta Be Out of Your Mind. Those two books I hold on to as references because I really seriously believe that between the three of these, they cover a lot of material. So this week we're going to take a look at a chapter called Not Focusing on the Target. Notice a lot of these chapters that I've been taking out of this book have to do with either focus or aiming or swing, stopping the gun, things like that. And I really believe that these are really key concepts or points that cause people to miss targets. So that's the reason why I'm kind of focusing on these particular chapters. There's a lot of really good chapters I've mentioned before in this book to discuss a lot of shooting problems, but in terms of the program here, the ones that I really want to focus on, these are the ones that are really, at least for me, I think are most important. So not focusing on the target. Again, the book starts out here and it has the four kind of common points or questions that they'll ask of every shooting problem, which is, what does it really mean? How do I know if I'm doing it? How do I stop doing it? And things I can do to prevent it from happening again. So what it really means. This means that the eyes are not focused on the leading edge of the target. Sometimes a shooter's focus may be on the target, but not on the leading edge. For example, if the focus is on the trailing edge of the target, he or she may opt to shoot behind the target most of the time. In addition, the shooter may be looking at the target but not focusing on the target. This causes the eyes to roam around the target, and shots will be erratic, with some shots in the middle of the target, some shots in the front of the target, some shots in the back of the target. When a shooter is focusing on the leading edge of the target, where he or she is looking brings the gun through where the eyes are looking, and the subconscious mind will recognize the correct sight picture and cause the trigger to be pulled at the right time. Now, this is really interesting because one of the weekly email kind of newsletter things I get is from NSCA. It's called NSCA Target Talk. And one of the guys there who is an NSCA instructor by the name of Don Curry has a weekly tip. And this week's tip is on what he called chips, or chipping the target. And somebody asked the question, basically, I think I'm in the same place to the target every time I'm shooting the same place. I have the same lead, but sometimes I break the front edge, sometimes I break the back edge. It's never consistent. Sometimes I just completely shatter the target. Other times I get, chips off the target. And the response by Don was basically that you're not focusing on a specific point of the target. You're focusing kind of like a global focus on the target itself. And the example he gave with respect to that, he said, picture what they refer to as laser sharp focus, which is what you want to have on the target, versus, let's say, a spotlight focus from a flashlight. Well, in a spotlight focus of a flashlight, you may have a beam about this big. So the target is anywhere in there, you're going to get different varying breaks depending on where the target is in a window that's that large, versus a spotlight focus where you're literally looking at the leading edge. A lot of times they'll tell you to pick out like a dime-sized part of the target and focus on that part, and it results in a lot more consistent hits on the target itself. So it's kind of interesting that point there is very similar to what the book is discussing here. So it says significant problems can exist if the focus is not on the target at all, which can happen when the focus is something other than the target, such as the front bead. And they give an example here in the chapter on aiming. We did a discussion before in the chapter on aiming and the problems there about how you will see when people are aiming is that the gun will be moving with the target, and then all of a sudden the eyes come back to the front bead. The muzzles will slow down or stop, or the muzzles will kind of bounce around as the person is trying to chase the target, so to speak. So how do I know if I'm doing it? If the target continues to appear as a streak and lacks definition, you are doing it. When the target leaves the machine, the eyes will first pick it up. It will appear as a blur. However, as the eyes focus on the leading edge of the target, it should become clearer. Some shooters actually claim to be able to see concentric rings in the target's dome as they focus on the leading edge. Now that's interesting because I've actually been able to see that recently on targets that are fairly close, and I'm going to say probably out to maybe 30, 35 yards, maybe 40 at max, where I'm actually able, and a lot of times it depends on the lighting, backlighting and everything, but I'm actually able to actually see the rings on the target or the dome itself. Recently, I went in for an eye exam, and one thing that I've noticed before is that my left eye is very sharp at distance. My right eye is not as sharp as my left eye. My right eye is my dominant eye. I'm right-handed, right eye dominant. So a lot of times when it comes to shooting, I would see the target, but I really wouldn't be able to focus on it really clearly. My right eye really wasn't that far off, so what I ended up getting is a contact lens for my right eye only that I wear only for shooting now, and it's really improved my vision in terms of being able to see targets clearer. And it's also been interesting that my shooting scores have improved here in the last couple of weeks. So I don't know if it's a matter of the improved vision or just getting better at what I'm doing, but sharp vision is very critical. So it says, continuing to see the targets as streaks causes your barrel movement to the blur to be erratic from shot to shot. You will have the feeling of always trying to catch up to the streak. Because you do not have a well-defined focus on the leading edge of the target, both your hits and misses will be erratic. As a result, the eyes will be moving all around the target, and misses may occur all around the target. And the hits will occur in different sections of the target. This is a direct contrast to a shooter who is focusing on the leading edge of the target, but is consistently missing the target in the same place every time. So this is kind of very similar to what I was discussing about the comments that Don Curry was making, in that when you are getting chips or different breaks all around the target, it's probably a result of you not having a very sharp focus on a specific part, but kind of like I'm going to say a global focus, or a focus on the whole entire target itself, and your point there as a result of that can move around the target. It's interesting, you think at distance, your shotgun pattern may be, 30 inches or so, give or take. How could I possibly miss? But, we've all seen it on targets that are broken, where, you can literally see the front half of the target will break off, or the back half of the target will break off, and it's very clear that, part of your pattern is literally slicing the target. If you are not focusing the target, you'll be missing targets even when the barrel-target relationship seems to look good. The problem is that you really don't know what a good barrel to target relationship looks like, and you'll never be able to obtain a consistent sight picture because the sight picture obtained will be different from shot to shot. When trying to recognize or diagnose this problem, you may not recognize it as a defect because you keep on seeing what you think is good. And I've had that happen before too, in that you go and you shoot at a target and you miss and you think, how could I possibly miss that? I was right on that target. But then you go back and realize afterwards that you didn't have a really sharp focus on the target, or when you think that you were right on the target, you're measuring that relative to the barrel. And that's something that we talked about before about being excessively barrel aware, and that you are probably putting a little bit too much focus or awareness on the barrels relative to the bird. Now, what I've noticed, at least in terms of that, is that when I have a sharp focus on the bird, I can feel where the barrels are without actually looking at them. I know the position of the gun relative to the bird without actually having to go back and even in being peripherally aware of the barrels whatsoever. Now, when I say peripherally aware, I may not realize that, or I may not think that I am. But in reality, I think what happens is your subconscious is processing that information. Even though I don't remember it, it saw it and it knows where the right position is. But when you start putting basically too much conscious awareness of where the barrels are relative to the bird, then you're no longer looking at the bird, you're more aware of the barrels. And as we mentioned before, that causes your gun typically to slow down and or stop. So how do I stop doing it? You should use eye exercises and concentration exercises to improve your ability to visually and mentally focus. You may not be able to focus on the leading edge of a target for reasons that is both physical and mental. Being able to clearly focus on a specific area of a small target ripping through the air at 50 miles plus represents significant physical and mental effort, and I will agree to that. Although this effort does not require brute physical strength, it does require tremendous effort as part of the eyes and mind. Eye exercises are for the muscles and tendons of the eyes, are much like body muscles or exercising body muscles. The more the eyes muscles are worked, the stronger they get and the less fatigue. So in terms of eye exercises and whatnot, if you go to Dead Target School, there's a bunch of articles there, articles and tips. And one of the articles that they have is eye exercises that you can do. And I really highly recommend that you go and check that out and go look at some of the eye exercises that they have and work that into just some of the practice that you do during the week. So again, for me, I often work on just basically shotgun mount, doing what's referred to as the 3-bullet drill, things of that nature. So you might also want to work into that, some of the eye exercises that they talk about doing here. Let's see. So in addition to eye exercises, you should do some concentration exercises. Concentration exercises should be clear on being able to picture in your mind images that display a clear target vision and focus on the leading edge. This to me sounds a lot like visualization, and I mentioned before about the strength or the attributes of visualization, where I will visualize the target, I will visualize the bird-barrel relationship of the target. Basically, you're just setting up, mental images or mental pictures that your subconscious then works on and attempts to duplicate when it comes to shooting. Another explanation for not being able to focus on the leading edge of the target is when you have the wrong hold point. As a result, your eye focus prior to calling for the target is in the wrong position. We recently did an episode on breaking down the shot, where we talked about break point, hold point, look point, and all that. So I would recommend that you go back and check that episode out again for the discussion on that. So things I can do to prevent it from happening again. When you are shooting, you should watch other shooters' targets to reinforce the mind and the eye's habit of concentrating on the leading edge. The eye muscles, like all muscles, need to be trained and worked on a regular basis to be kept in tone and shape. By continuing to watch other targets of shooters, you will train your eyes to quickly and clearly focus on the leading edge of targets. By repeatedly watching other shooters' targets, you will find the definition and clarity of all targets increase. For example, you should watch at least the target of the shooter preceding you. That's really important. I do the same thing. When I am on deck, so to speak, or in the hole, I really watch the target track, line, speed, everything, and try to make myself look at a specific spot on that target, so that when I get up there to shoot, I'll be looking at the exact same thing. So I'm now kind of now programming my subconscious of this is what the target looks like as it's being thrown. This is what I want you to see in the air. And I've been finding that works out really well. Another thing I found is that when I'm shooting trap, and I don't do that a lot, but when I'm shooting trap, rather than not watching the bird for the other shooters, I'll watch the other bird as it comes out to, again, just keep reinforcing that same thing, to look at the angles. And also in trap, it's interesting that if you get winds or gusts or things like that, you can notice how the bird's being either pushed up or pushed down. So again, if you have a breeze or a wind that's coming in at you, it'll tend to cause a bird to rise. If you have a wind that's coming from behind you, it'll push the bird down. It's stuff like this that you can watch for on other shooters so that when it's your turn to shoot, you don't get as much of a surprise. An important preemptive measure is to get your eyes checked yearly. Even if you're doing all the things described in this chapter to diagnose the problem, stop from doing it, and prevent it from reoccurring, there is that proper and clear focus of the leading edge that can occur if you are shooting clay targets with less than 20/20 vision, corrected or uncorrected. So proper vision says via yearly exams and continued employment of eye exercises, the best methods prevent inconsistent target acquisition and focus. Again, like I mentioned, I just went out recently and had my eyes examined again. It's been 2 years since I've had them checked. It's probably something you, like they're recommending here, that you should do every year. But again, I was guilty of that, but I was kind of, in terms of kind of, I'm not going to say getting in the leading edge of shooting and wanting to improve my shooting, I thought, you know, I probably ought to go out and get my eyes checked and see if I can't possibly get to the point here where I can put a contact in for my right eye. The interesting thing is 2 years ago, the correction for my right eye, I think it was 0.25. They don't make contacts that go down to 0.25. This year, 2 years later, my right eye was actually, they said about 0.4, and they don't make 0.4, they make 0.5. So my right eye is slightly overcorrected, but not massively. And I've been finding it works out really well. So for this week's trivia question, BJ McDaniel describes 4 phases of a pre-shot routine, and they're very specific points. The information can be found on Dead Target School by looking around for it. I'm not going to tell you where to look for it, but what I want you to do is to find the 4 phases of the pre-shot routine according to BJ McDaniel, and send them in to us in the next week, and we will, out of all the correct answers, we will pick a winner, and you will get your own copy of this book, which again, as I've mentioned before, I think is really invaluable to kind of getting call it self-teaching. You know, a lot of books go out there and they talk about, and I mentioned this before, they tell you about how to do something, but there's nothing really that discusses that when things are, you know, when the wheels are falling off, so to speak, of how to correct the problem. It's like, you know, you're on your own to try to figure that out. Well, this book goes through and discusses when the wheels fall off, how to recognize it, what to do about it, and then how to prevent it from happening again in the future. And I really strongly recommend this book. Again, like I said, there are only 3 books that I hold on to, and this is one of them, and I will never let it go. And in fact, I frequently go back and review this book on just, you know, some of the important points in here. Next chapter that we're going to cover in here is on optical illusions, which is really interesting because as I've mentioned before, the target setters love nothing more than to screw with your mind. And they will set up target pairs or target arrangements intentionally trying to suck you into making mistakes, or setting up target pairs that have optical illusions to draw you into doing or reading the targets incorrectly. So again, go get the answer to the question, what are the 4 phases of the pre-shot routine according to BJ McDaniel. It's on deadtargetschool.com's website. We'll put links to all of this information of where you can get this book. Also, the other book from Mark Taylor, Clay Target Shooting the Mental Game, on Shotgun Sports Magazine's website. And if you have any questions for us or anything like that, you can contact us at powerfactorshow@gmail.com. And by the way, send in your trivia question responses to powerfactorshow@gmail.com. Don't do it on Facebook. Don't do it on YouTube, because the problem is that if you answer the question on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, the next guy that comes along doesn't have to do any effort at all. He'll just grab your response and post the same thing. So rather than, giving away your answers, it's, the same thing when you were in school. You didn't go and take your test and hand it to the guy next to you and go, here, have fun. So don't do the same thing there. Just go ahead and get the answers into powerfactorshow@gmail.com. If you have any questions for us, you can hit us there, or if you have any comments about this episode or just the concept behind this, go ahead and post them to Facebook. A lot of people will get involved there and get involved in the discussion, and it can be interesting. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.